reasons that it's called LiDAR. One is just a mixture of light and radar, and some say it's an acronym for light imaging detection and ranging. I guess 6 in one hand, half a dozen in the other. It's, like I said, it's one of the newest technologies. We've adopted it into, I think, LiDAR and drones, and I think we're going to get the two of those together at some point. But it's one of our newest methods of surveying. It sends out lasers, and I mean millions of lasers, from a main unit, which is, well, shoot, I'll wait. Anyway, it measures distance based on light return to the sensors, which is the red thing you'll see on the front of the unit. This is what I was about to shine a laser at. That thing right there with the R on it, that's our main laser unit. And it spins and shoots out, like I said, about 1 million laser points a second and catches returns from those lasers to measure distance, density, and everything else, and creates a 3D model. Now, this is the entire setup that we've got on our vehicle. That's, of course, our LiDAR unit right there, our main control box in the back seat. That hooks up to 2 batteries. It hooks up to our car battery, and then we've got a secondary battery in the back seat that it runs off of. That runs to a computer system that's latched to the front window, so I keep that in my lap when we're riding. We've got the DMI, or distance measurement indicator, which looks like a TV antenna that we hooked onto a tire. And that kind of fills the gap between when we don't have a GPS connection, so that we can still be accurate when the satellites are blocked by tree coverage or what have you. And this big ugly looking thing right here is our Ladybug. It's a pentagonal shaped camera with 1 camera on top, so it's got 6 lenses. And it takes pictures in increments. They usually do 2-second increments along with the scans. And you do something really cool with those pictures. I'll get to that in a minute, but it actually colorizes those dots so we have an accurate 3D image once we finish our scan and process it. This is what it looks like on top of the truck. The Ladybug camera linked directly to the LiDAR unit box. Like I said, it has 6 lenses and takes those pictures going along with the LiDAR scans, and I can see that all on that screen that I showed you on 2 previous slides. I can actually see those live photos as we're driving along, as well as the reach of the scans that I'm taking. Now, I'm sorry about this next slide, y'all. I made it in paintbrush, and yeah. Anyway, this is the main control box. This sits in the back seat. We actually had to take the second row out of our Explorer to put that in there. And this is the brains. It's got 2 computers in there. Everything hooks up to it. That big old fat cord right there goes directly to the LiDAR. There's one that goes to the DMI, one that goes to the monitor in the front with the keyboard that I'm using to start and stop my scans. And there's our battery connections down there on the bottom left. And that shows our voltage and wattage, and you got to pay attention to that, because if it drops low, you just wasted a whole day's work if you don't save real quick. And then this next slide, this is actually my vantage point from the passenger seat. That's me sitting there with an M.Dot laptop in my lap, and the keyboard for the LiDAR and the monitor for the LiDAR. Now, I know it's not easy to see, but if you look real close right here, you can see a line, and then that's actually where our vehicle is right there. And then on here, we're using, anybody familiar with QGIS or Rome? Well, that's the software we're using to get to our HPMS samples, which is what we're collecting with our LiDAR unit. I'm sure we'll collect other stuff, but for right now, we're kind of learning how to use the LiDAR by collecting HPMS with it. And HPMS is Highway Performance Maintenance Systems. It's what we send to the federal government every year. We split the state into thirds and send the characteristics of these road samples that the feds ask us for. And back in the day, you went out on the side of the road with a tape measure and a buddy and tried not to get hit by a vehicle and measure everything you could. Well, with LiDAR, we don't have to do that anymore. It makes it so much safer, it's not even a comparison. And like I said, the monitor also lets you know when your equipment is running properly. You see all that green right there. When that turns red, that's, like, I done messed up, need to fix something right now because something ain't jiving. And I said, this man knows all about it. Joe Lee's been with me on several scans, and he's seen it turn red. And it's bad news. So we hook up to what's called the CORS network, or the Continuous Operating Reference System. Our GPS links to that so that we have a direct, exact location for where we're capturing these point clouds until we can get back to the office and actually process them. But that's how we get our trajectory for everything that we run. And you see all the CORS, all those green dots are our CORS locations. And if one of them's red, we can't scan there that day because we're not going to get accurate information. So that's the first thing we have to do when we go out to scan LiDAR, is make sure that the CORS system is up to date and that we can scan. Now we get to the fun part. I'm going to show you what some scans look like. The one on the left, that is one raw scan from the Belhaven neighborhood, I believe. And it's on the XYZ axis, so you can flip it upside down, turn it around, spin it whichever way you need to find the characteristics that you're looking for. That's why I got that cool little overhead view of it. And the slide on the right was from our training, our LiDAR training. We had some guys come from Austria, which is where Regal is from. That's the company that we bought our LiDAR from. And we drove around the MDOT building, the Jackson building, and from one lap around the building, we were able to get this scan of MDOT. That's the main MDOT building downtown. And with the software, we could cut out all that vegetation if we wanted to and see what was underneath it. I mean, this stuff is cool. Now, I guess you're wondering what we're doing with this data. Currently, the planning division, which is the division that I've been lucky enough to work in for 8 years, we're using it, like I said, solely to collect HPMS data. Rather than us having to cross traffic and play Frogger and jump medians and 6-foot grass, it's just me and a driver. And we go out there and we scan all day. And what used to take a month and a half could take 2 days. And so the data is then processed back at the office. That's honestly the bulk of the time that LiDAR takes, is the data processing. And I'll show you the beast of the machine that IS had to make for us just to process this stuff. We had to have a special computer made to handle this data, because it is something else. One thing that I really, really want to push about LiDAR is that it's going to save some lives. That's less people out there on the side of the road. It's less people having to stop in traffic. It's less people having to cross medians. And I've had a couple close calls myself doing HPMS. I sleep better at night knowing that this is the way I'm collecting data now. Talk about that beast of a machine. There she is right there. That is a custom-built CPU made by our IS department in the Jackson building. It is the fastest, it says zip code, it's the fastest in our area code. It holds all 5 of our hard drives, our 2 scan drives, and our 3 camera drives, and it requires just a ridiculous amount of processing power to process these point clouds. I wish I would have brought some more pictures of the raw point clouds, because you're talking just millions of points that we're having to make sense out of and turn into these 3D models of roadways and everything else. Now, after we process that raw data, this is where we get all our info from. It looks like a photograph, right? Just a regular photograph. Those are colorized points. The Ladybug camera that I talked to you about, well, our program, when we get back to the office and process that point cloud, it takes those photos from that Ladybug and colorizes those points that we've collected. So then we have a colorized 3D model, just like Google Earth would have, say if you're thinking Street View. And you can turn up and down the intensity of that laser. So if you want to get a very light, almost translucent scan, you can do that. If you want it to look like this, closer to a photograph, you can do that too. Then we take it from the original software, which is called Raw Process, and we move it over to, anybody familiar with Open Roads software? Yeah, we move it over to TETA, and which is made by Open Roads. And that's where we do our cross sections, we do our dynamic segmentations, we extract as much data as possible. We can extract that as a shape file, bring it into any of our GIS software, and that's as accurate as we're going to get. I mean, that is to the hundredth of an inch. It's crazy how accurate this stuff is. Now, let me show you what we were working with before we got our LiDAR unit. That, and this book right here, had a tape measure, and that's all we had to collect HPMS before we had a LiDAR unit. We had our field manual, a tape measure, and a survey wheel. And we would fill these sheets out. It's 24 different characteristics that we would have to fill in by eye. And we're sitting here rolling and clicking a little counter and saying, okay, there's the intersection, and there's the intersection, and there's the church. You got that? Let's run this road again. You know, it wasn't accurate. We could run it 5 times and get 5 different returns. With LiDAR, we don't have to worry about that. We can layer Google Earth with our LiDAR points. And I mean, it doesn't get any clearer than that. Eventually, no, we're doing small projects for other districts as far as actual survey work, but we hadn't gotten into doing any actual surveying with it. But I imagine when that time comes, when we get a fleet, it's going to change the game completely. Now, we don't have to deal with these anymore, thank goodness. I still got them in my office as a relic. I think I'll frame them. Anyway, we're talking about the old way of collecting. Like I said, 24 characteristic fields we had, and that was, we were responsible for. There goes my mic. Oh. This took an extremely long time. It also added several environmental hazards to the job, getting back to safety, guys. With LiDAR, we will completely revolutionize the way that we collect and maintain HPMS data. And I'm so happy to be a part of that, and I'm proud to be a part of that. The tools we traditionally use to collect and measure HPMS were survey wheels, tape measure, and a DMI. Not the DMI that I showed you earlier, but one that's in the dash of a pickup truck that you calibrate by rolling a mile and all that type of stuff. The technicians would have to count crossings or at-grade crossings as they drove past them, historical landmarks, public buildings, train tracks, watercress, you name it. Using LiDAR, all we do is drive that path and then get back to the office, and we can look at it there in the safety of our own office, where we're not worrying about, you know, all the things that could happen out there. Even dealing with the public. Public can be dangerous sometimes when they come up to you and they don't know what you're doing and they try to get involved in it. We've had that happen. Had somebody fly up on us and say, man, that guy just broke my windshield with a rock. And I said, well, we ain't the people, boss. But anyway, the possibilities are really, and I'm going to be cheesy here, to infinity and beyond. As of now, we have one LiDAR unit. With that being said, we're not going to have one LiDAR unit for long. We're already in the process of getting 2 more. That'll be our fleet. And the things we can do with LiDAR technology in the future, the possibilities are endless. It's possible we could eventually have LiDAR scans of every maintained road in the state. And that would make it to where we could automate roadway characteristics. And I don't know if any of you have to deal with the roadway characteristic schema, but it's been a work in progress for at least the 8 years I've been here. And you could go in there and start updating today, and there's no shortage of stuff that is wrong, that has to be corrected. It's, God knows how long, 10, 12 years old. With LiDAR, we can automate that process and have everything accurate and just run a trigger, run a program to go in there and see if anything's changed and automatically update those fields. And that's what we're trying to move towards. And the possibilities of what we can do with this, it just keeps going on and on. I know we have drones now. They make these LiDAR units that attach to drones. And the stuff we could do with that, I mean, it blows my mind just to think about. Not to mention for our waterways, they have aquatic LiDAR. If we wanted to get a detailed model of the Mississippi River Basin, we could put a couple of LiDAR units on the bottom of the boat, and bam, you know, we'd have those points. And it can shoot through water, you know, it's returning whatever's on the bottom of those lasers are bouncing off of the bottom of that river. But that about wraps it up for me. Y'all got any questions, comments?
Y'all got it attached to a truck.
Yes, sir. We got it attached to a Ram 1500 with a LiDAR camper shell on the back.
That the only vehicle it's ever been on?
No, we had it on an Explorer, but it had a spoiler on the back, and it was cast in the shadow. Any way we did it, so we actually turned the Explorer into the division vehicle and put it on the truck.
Okay, I remember being in the garage. That's the vehicle. Well, I saw.
Now the truck's at the shop now, in the stall, at the maintenance shop, and that's where we're keeping it now, because we're keeping it fully assembled, so we can just go out and scan when we need to.
How does it work on the canopy?
Say again, sir.
Under a canopy of, say, a tree, you mentioned using it for surveying. If you're surveying, you might be out in the woods and you're underneath a canopy of trees or something.
And you would lose your GPS connection in that case, which is where the DMI comes in. The DMI kind of fills in that gap of where you don't have anything because of tree coverage. So you'll still get returns. And what's great about LiDAR is you can go in with that software and you can take those trees out and you can still see what's behind them. You can remove layers of vegetation and see what's up under them. So it's no telling what you could do as far as that goes.
Why not just use DMI instead of GPS at all then?
I'd say it's an accuracy issue. The CORS satellites with the GPS are extremely accurate, and the DMI has failed before. I just think it's nice to have, in my opinion, nice to have that as a backup. Yes, sir.
How much do the units cost?
They're not cheap. That unit that we've got is about $1/3 of $1 million.
It's still 3 times as much as I thought it was.
That I'm not sure of, sir. I don't want to tell you false information, so I'm not sure on that one.
Like the computer, it could be used for multiple use.
Oh yeah, definitely. You're talking about the box? Yes, sir. It's the LiDAR unit itself that's the costly. The laser itself that's really the costly piece.
Are there any dead spots in the state there? Between 40 there?
We haven't found one yet because of how spread out. I'll bring that CORS map up again. Because of how spread out those CORS satellites are, we have not come across a dead spot yet. And I want to say we've been to all 82, but we may have, around above Waynesboro, it gets pretty sparse. And there's a couple of areas like below Wesson, maybe up in North Mississippi, around where we're at now, maybe above where we're at now, but we've never run into a dead spot. All right. Anybody else? Man, y'all have been great. This is the biggest group I've ever talked to. Thank you so much.